So that is the discussion about preserving it. Don't get me started requiring It's only 30. Died. Really? First thing I was like, let's just look at you in the chat. What's going on that? Chat. The comment chat. I'm just saying, yeah.
You already got that. Yeah, no, actually, if he was into it,
Yeah, we're gonna need to, or I'll have you set up with her.
I don't know that.
Unless you want to give them minutes. Susan, as you see up on there, meetings need to have to start that.
Are we waiting for Shane?
And if you don't, then you would have to. You can start the meeting and then ask.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 15th, 2025 Land Preservation Committee meeting. Call the meeting to order. A couple announcements for this evening. Be advised that we have 4 assisted listening devices available for anyone who is hard of hearing. Please come forward if you require one. In accordance with Resolution 2-2012, we are informed that Scott Stilson of Vincent Drive is recording tonight's meeting for posting on YouTube. This meeting is also available and being recorded electronically on Microsoft Teams. And in accordance with Resolution 20-2023, The rules of conduct for public meetings and public comment period shall be observed and are listed at the bottom of the agenda.
So you would just, yeah.
I make a motion to meet quorum for the meeting this evening. In accordance with the ordinance, quorum is a minimum of 3 of 5 appointed voting committee members. Shall consent a quorum for the purposes of the committee this evening. There are 2 committee persons here. We have Laura here from the Board of Supervisors. She is the chairperson. She would make the 3rd person to make quorum according to the ordinance. So make a motion to accept that. Motion is 2 yes, so we can continue with the meeting. Going to go to approval of minutes. A review and approval of the January 21st, 2025 minutes. And do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, second. Meeting minutes are approved from the January 21st meeting. Moving on to public comment. If anyone on this side of the room has any public comment, please feel free to come forward. We'll have the 3-minute session when you're ready to begin. Erin, please.
Is there going to be comment available after they give their presentation, or no, it's just the only time to? Because I have questions, but they might be questions that get answered.
There's nothing on the agenda for that.
I mean, you're fine if you want to allow questions that may not be addressed.
We can do that.
Yeah.
We can have a short period for that after the presentation from the concerns.
Okay.
Do you have anything in the meantime you'd like to discuss? Or?
No, I don't think so. I'm just thinking they might answer some of my questions.
Are you good at Q&A?
Yeah.
So the conservancy will have a Q&A.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be a second public comment. It's the conservancy is here to answer any questions you have about the documents.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. Any comment from the other side of the room? Okay. Seeing there's no comment, we move to new business. Number 1 on our new business is the land preservation plan update by the Brandywine Conservancy.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Sharp from the Brandywine Conservancy. I'm here with my colleague Liz Falcone. We are here to present the first draft of the land preservation plan update. So this, I think, will be the 4th update to the existing township land preservation plan. So the first plan was done shortly after the open space referendum was passed, and then there's been this 3 updates since the first plan. So essentially this this draft, we looked over, I think the last update was, I don't think it was adopted, but accepted, finalized in 2019. So this is an update as of the 2019 plan. So just a little rundown of the plan, and then I have a couple questions for the committee, and then we can open it up to questions. But just to provide an outline of the content of the plan, so Chapter 1, it's pretty simple, provides a introduction to the township, little history of the land preservation program within the township, and then identifies some precedents for other land preservation plans, as well as open space funds within Chester County. And then the chapter ends with a list and summary of some of the additional benefits of land preservation. The benefits of land stewardship, water quality improvements, ecosystem services, cost savings for the municipality and public services, agricultural viability, and Amish community retention. So the one question I had on this section, is there anything missing in the land preservation program benefits, or is there additional information that's needed in the introduction? Essentially what we did here, because it was looking back at the history of the township and the program, I just updated some numbers that needed to be updated within this introduction. But I thought maybe the program benefits, we could add anything that might not have been in the past plan. So that's chapter 1. I don't know if anybody has any questions on chapter 1. We can kind of go there's 3 chapters, so we can go chapter by chapter. I think chapter 1 is probably the most straightforward, just kind of setting the scene. Then chapter 2, this is where the maps, the priority maps live that we developed with the committee. Now, there are some caveats with what is presented as protected lands on this map. Chester County hasn't yet provided, typically at the beginning of each year, they come out with a data layer of all the protected lands that were protected the year prior. And it's around this time, kind of spring, that they make that data layer available. So we don't have that layer yet. The final draft, I'm assuming we will have that layer by the final draft, but we did our best. I worked with our GIS manager to at least update the protected lands that the conservancy was involved with, but it might not fully reflect any properties that were preserved in the township through the county agricultural program, or any parcels that weren't directly, that the conservancy didn't map and were involved with. So I will provide that caveat, and if there's any glaring missing parcels that need to be considered or changed from the priority, which is a variation of yellow to brown to green. If anything has been preserved that isn't yet on this map, but like I said, I'm hoping that we'll have the county's layer for that. And then the other question on these maps, are there any parcels that, you know, the township is working to finalize and are likely to be finalized within, you know, by the next draft, which would be likely in August for your next meeting? So any parcels that are, you know, right on the edge of being finalized and protected, I can always incorporate that just so we have as up-to-date information in this chapter as we can. Anything that happens preserved between now and when that final plan comes out, or any time within 2025, that won't be in the county protected lands layer, because they do it and they update it annually. So those were my 2 questions for chapter 2, but I will open it up to any questions on this chapter.
So we did close on 2 properties.
Okay.
One was from the application period last year through the county in
Okay.
Woodlands.
Okay.
And then the township was donated 10 acres on Gibbons Road, which the Conservancy was with us during closure.
Okay.
That's another agenda item tonight.
It's actually not on the agenda.
I see it as number 3, Gibbon Road property preservation. That's going to be on page 2 of the new business, E3.
I don't like that.
You have a copy of the today?
But it wasn't on his version.
Correct, because that just, yes, so that just came in recently, and that's why it's in the discussion. So that's an ongoing discussion.
Okay.
John Goodall did have a conversation with Shane over the last week.
Okay.
The indication is that the previous owners asked, his spirit was that we keep the woodlands. So our intent, I believe, after it comes back at the next meeting for Land Pres, is to discuss putting an easement on. The intent of the township, maybe at a future date, would to make it like a passive park with maybe a walking trail. So the other two properties that had the applications approved by the county, we have not had any forward momentum on yet. One of the properties did come up for auction, sold, fell through. The current owner wanted to leave that obligation, or if the new landowner wished to enter it, to be their choice. And then we have a final property up off of Chestnut Tree that is partially in West Antmeal, partially in Honeybrook. That's still working through the process. So
Okay.
we don't know at this point if we're gonna close on those easements in calendar year 2025. But they had been approved, and the conservancy is aware of those.
Okay. Maybe I can make a note to circle back with you and
Sure.
when we're finalizing the next draft, and you can send me any updates
Okay.
that need to be included. And then if those properties, I might just shoot you an email tomorrow just to make sure I have those properties
Okay.
that have been finalized
Sure.
on this map. I imagine we would have the one woodland property, the Gibbons Run, or Gibbons
Gibbons
Road.
was the one that you helped facilitate.
Yeah, I would think we would have that, but,
And then the other one, you were involved with.
Okay.
Conservancy was involved with, it was on the same day the closure back in March.
okay, so we might have both of those, but I'll just get those,
Sure.
parcel numbers so I can double check.
Okay.
Any other questions on chapter 2?
I had some questions on chapter 2. One, I just want to say the maps online from the 2019 version to the current version, they're a lot easier to read in the 2019 version. Like, you can open them up and see like street names and everything, as opposed to this current version, everything's super blurry. Like, you can't see anything.
Okay.
So I think if you use this map, it would be easier for people to look at, because you can't read anything on the newer version.
And that might be just, we've formatted all of this in Word, which has its limitations, so for the final, we can always splice things together in PDF to try to maintain some of the quality of the maps.
Okay, and then I also have some questions regarding some of the properties for the, you guys consider natural resource priorities, particularly some of the ones along 322. There, if you overlay it with what's actually there, so is that the ag priority map that's up right now?
This is the,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
page are
you
you,
look
which
at-
map are you,
The natural resources one.
do you know what map number that is?
It's just the next one, I
Next
think.
one,
Yeah, map 3.
Map 3, okay.
Yeah, so in particular, the way this map is oriented is kind of different too, but at the top part, there's an orange shaded parcel that is a mobile home park.
Okay.
So my question, would something like that even be eligible for preservation?
No, so this, so thank you for pointing that out. This map was strictly a mapping exercise, so the way the natural resource priorities were determined was basically, we had the criteria listed, and If, for instance, 1,500 feet of stream was located on that parcel, it would get a point. And this is purely based on size and number of natural resources on that property. We did our best to kind of do a scan to make sure we weeded out any properties that were developed, like a mobile home property, because they're not individually parceled out. Sometimes those get caught up, same with shopping centers, sometimes they get caught up because they meet the minimum
Right.
acreage, and they might have a little stream going at some point, but we do our best to weed those out, so we will.
Yeah, I think that needs to get looked at
Yeah.
closer, especially the ones along 322. I think almost 3 of them are mobile home parks, so that's gonna reduce your priority list, I would say pretty significantly, as well as, the Honeybrook Golf Course is listed as a priority. Can a golf course be offered reservation and continue to operate as a golf course?
So a lot of times, now I don't know that there are any examples in Chester County of golf courses having easements, and they might have easements on portions of golf courses. But what we've seen in some parts of Chester County and parts of northern Delaware, that golf courses, if they decide to close the golf course, then that's then up for potential development. So in that case, then a lot of people either preserve, or in the case of along Route 1, there was a golf course, Loch Nair, which has been acquired by the township for a park. So it might still be valuable to keep that on.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if they, if they're going out and talking to landowners
Right.
about, hey, are you interested? Could you offer that to the golf course and they still need a golf course? You know what I mean? Like,
They would have a very large exclusionary zone, so
almost.
it might not be the best use as existing as a golf course. But in the future, if for any reason that golf course is up for development or going to be sold in some way, then that's the case that maybe the township would get involved and want to do some sort of preservation action.
Okay, but as currently as a golf course, you're not.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any examples of that. I'm sure in some case, and it might depend on the size,
Yeah.
and what is active golf course and what's not.
Okay. But yeah, I think that's all the questions I have for Jeff.
I actually have a question, just going back to the golf course example. If the golf course approached you, would you entertain it as a preservation? I mean, would you take the application?
I would have to ask my colleagues on the preservation side of the conservancy whether they have experience with typically with.
Because I'm just saying, if I was the owner of a golf course, I own a business, and I knew I'd get a check for land preservation,
Right.
I'm not gonna get rid of the golf course, I'd be all in on it at that point. I mean, like, I almost feel like there should be some criteria that something like that is really at the bottom of the list, that somebody couldn't approach, because they're not gonna sell it, they've been there forever, and that would just be a given to them. Like, the money should be prioritized as something that's, you do want to protect.
So, I mean, it wouldn't qualify as an agricultural easement, so it would be eliminated for that. So the only thing a golf course could be considered for is conservation value or a conservation easement. And they're pretty strict. You have to hit certain conservation values in order to qualify, and then there would be restrictions on the use of the golf course. So I think most of the active components of the golf course would be incompatible with a conservation easement. Just because, you know, they're maintaining it in a way that is not natural. So I would think we wouldn't, but I mean, there are some golf courses that have a lot of extra land, so there might be carve-outs that are preserved. But then we call them exclusionary zones. So on a particular property, if you have a house there, and then you have we call it the exclusionary zone, that it's not subject to the conservation easement, any activity that goes on within the exclusionary zone. So it would be probably too big of an exclusionary zone to justify an easement. But that's a good question for my coworkers who are more actively on the easement side. So I can always follow up and, you know, send the township any information to send out, just to see if there are any cases of that happening. I know there are when a golf course closes, but I don't know if there are any cases where there are active golf courses with easements, unless there's a section of the golf course that doesn't have any golf course related activities on it. But that's a very good question.
One other question I have is, community I live in on 322, we have like 40, 50 acres of land. That's woods, pond, everything else. Now there's I think an easement on it in our HOA docs for, I think, wetland, I think. Is that the same as what's the type of easement that land preservation does, like that nothing can be done with that? That would be part of this land preservation. Like we have this, I mean, this land is actually a pain for us because we can't do nothing with it, and we have to still maintain it for 29 homes, you know?
Yeah, so a lot of times when a property is developed into multiple parcels or subdivided into a development, there are lands that can't be developed that are then either deed restricted. So it would depend on how the language for that land is written, whether there's an official conservation easement on it, or if it's deed restricted, where the deed held with the county prevents any development. So,
I think that's what it is.
Okay.
It's a deed held with the county.
So typically conservation easements, which would be held by organizations like the Conservancy, Natural Lands, other land trusts. There's an annual monitoring that occurs where land trust staff who hold the easement, they go out and actually look at the easement and make sure nothing is happening on that easement that's not allowed to be happening in the areas that aren't in the exclusionary zone. So if you don't have, which typically HOA land, it kind of depends on how the developer set things up. But if you're not aware of any land trust coming out to monitor.
There's not. It's a deed restricted.
Yeah.
So
That's the most common when it comes to HOA land. But we do typically consider that still protected lands. It just, sometimes when we really carve things out, we'll just list it as other because it doesn't fall within an agricultural easement or a conservation easement or public land.
So that would be something that you would call out on this map and say, we're not going to go after this land. It's
Right.
50 acres that there's nothing we can do with it.
Right, so that land should show up as green. If it doesn't,
I'll have to look at it then. to see
yeah,
where
either contact the township or I can fish out some business cards and you can shoot me an email to let me know.
All right.
Yeah. Any other questions for chapter 2? So chapter 3 gets into some of the accomplishments that have occurred, and these are all kind of a summary of what has been accomplished since the beginning of the open space program, with a specific focus on what has been accomplished since the 2019 plan. Within this section, there's a lot of graphs and charts looking at how many acres have been preserved over the course of the time, what the cost to the township has been, what type of leveraged funds have happened. So typically the township doesn't just, use all their funds on a property. They mix and match with other funding sources to cover a portion or all of the cost of preservation. So all the charts in the first half kind of capture the accomplishments, and then there's some projections with based on existing financials and just estimating based on the last 5 years, keeping on the same trajectory of preservation, what it might cost in the next 5 years. So doing some of those calculations. And then there's a couple sections that look into all of the different options for preserving land, so financial alternatives, and kind of outlines what additional opportunities are available with the open space funding. So it talks about land management and stewardship, land acquisition, so the township can acquire a property outright, and some different models for preserving land. So one of the newer, I think it's new since the last plan, we added what we've been referring to as the acquisition model. I think it's under financial alternatives, but the acquisition model is basically if there's a very hot parcel that there's a lot of pressure for preservation of a certain parcel, and they use this model in other places in the county. West Bradford has done this specifically with some of the parcels surrounding the Embryville complex. But there's a lot of development pressure on these parcels, so the township decided to purchase those properties outright. So they acquired those properties, then eased them. Then they subdivided and eased them, and then sold them with the easement in place. So when you sell a property that has been eased, you lose some of the value because it has less development potential. So basically the cost remaining to the township was the cost of the easement, because you subtract that from the purchase cost and when you're selling it. So we threw that in there because it's been very successful, especially for properties that are very timely and you need to take action fast. But you do run the risk of them not selling once you ease the property. But that is an option. In certain cases, it makes sense. So we added that as an option. The one section that I had questions for was we have a section in the financial alternatives section that talks about, and I don't know what, let me see the page number. But it basically talks about having a cap on the amount of funds. So it's on page 29. Or page number 29.
Yeah.
So at the very bottom of page number 29, there's a section that talks about identifying if the funds within the township open space funds ever exceed 4 million, the tax should be halved. This is pulled directly from the last plan. So I don't know if the committee still feels like that is the best course of action. I know that some, it still could make sense, but we could reword that or reevaluate that, that section with land prices and other factors in mind. But I just wanted to get your opinions on keeping that the way it is, or if that needs to be reevaluated.
So, are you planning on coming back with this draft to the Land Preservation Committee once more? Because I believe the board agrees that they would rather have their full board to give adequate feedback, and today is more of just not wasting your time and giving a little bit of thought, and we can put this on the next meeting if the board agrees, because these are topics I think have.
That need discussion.
Yeah, that had to have serious discussion, so
I also want to point out, we can't just like wave a wand and say, hey, we're going to cut this in half.
Well, right.
And I think it needs to be worded that way, that this has to be done by referendum.
Yep. So I'll make the note about including language on a referendum. So what I was planning on doing, considering a large portion of your land preservation committee is not present, I was planning on sending a follow-up email with all of my specific questions to the committee after this meeting, so that you all can take a more targeted review of this plan based around at least my outstanding questions, and then if, welcoming any additional feedback outside of my questions. So I was planning on sending that email this week following this meeting. And I do plan to have a draft, maybe a more final draft, to present at your August meeting. I was going to base that on, how final of a draft we needed to present at the August meeting based on the feedback from today. But if you feel like you want to have a chance to review and provide feedback at that also. And then after that meeting, if you all feel comfortable, contingent on any additional edits, if they're not significant enough, then you can always have the board review and accept the plan following that August meeting, but we can also always plan on another meeting if you need a little additional time.
One of my observations was you did a really good job on pulling together history, background, to-date information, but this is a plan, which to me is forward thinking. So this section on following our successes in the next 5 years, I think that really needs a whole lot more before this gets final.
Yeah, so so there are a few sections that I was going to ask if there was anything missing, if you wanted anything fleshed out more. So specifically, if there's anything additional for including in the financial alternatives, then there are some sections on the general policies that you all would need to review, because it kind of lays out the policies for the Land Preservation Committee moving forward. And then there's a section on the preservation process, which also outlines how a landowner would come to preserve their property. But if there's anything specific, so this plan basically is a financial review and then determining how much land is left key element of the plan is actually identifying which priority parcels that you want to review and go after. So I would view that as the future, the forward movement is really identifying which parcels on those various maps you want to prioritize and factoring that in to your preservation review process. But if there's anything specific that you would like us to really flesh out in the future movement,
Yes,
we
there's,
can.
I had a question, and if John Goodall was here, he could probably answer it off the top of his head, but he's not here. Of the properties on these maps that have been identified as priority that we have not yet put an easement on,
Mhm.
which ones have John or the conservancy had contact with? And what was the outcome of that? I mean, are there still priority lands out there that someone has talked to, but they haven't yet made a decision?
Mhm.
I think it would be helpful to know which ones of those are in
Okay.
order to go forward with which ones we might want to target as top priority.
Right. So where conversations have already been started, maybe which landowners might be kind of a little bit farther in the process towards preservation than others.
For the ones who have told us absolutely not,
Right.
don't ever come back and talk to me.
Yeah, that would, I'm wondering how to figure, well, we could just develop a list, kind of a tiered list of properties, perhaps in the appendix, that are kind of I don't know if we want to code them green, yellow, red, but at least having, top priorities, these are properties that conversations, the landowners, on the way, and then properties that are more of the last tier, maybe when they're sold or if another opportunity comes up. That's a really good point. And I think I can have John Goodall and some of our land conservation staff take a first stab at that, but then I might send it to you all just to get your perspective as well, to see if there are any landowners that you have interacted with that or fall somewhere within those categories. Are there any other questions on this section? I know there's a lot of information in this chapter 3. It's a lot of things.
Question. On page 27, you mentioned 5 years a couple of times during your presentation. So is the land preservation going to end in 5 years, or is it going to continue past 2030?
So the life of this plan, the cadence that the township has kind of followed is that they've updated these plans every 5 years. So that's kind of why it's been chunked out into every 5 years, because that's kind of the life of the plan. So in 5 years, it would be encouraged that the Land Preservation Committee and Township go through this process again to reevaluate, see where they're at, and make any decisions about, continuing forward.
at this point, are we committed, like, to make payments up to 2030, or are all the payments, like, they're taking the annual, or it ends in 2025, 2026?
So I think, so the chart following page 27, there are only, so the only committed payments as of, I reached out to the treasurer, I don't know, a couple weeks ago to get those numbers. So those are the only numbers that are committed as of now. But then there are projected numbers. So the committed easement payments are, a commitment has been made, those payments, that's been finalized. Then the projected easement payments, that's all just calculated based on the expenses from the past 5 years. And I might have looked, based on, basically from the last plan to now, what that, the cost of preservation have been over the last 5 years. And it was a little tricky because the COVID kind of slowed things down a little bit. So some of the estimates might be a little bit off because there was a lull in preservation. But yeah, so those protected easements, those aren't committed, those are just assumptions that, you know, more easements might come up and preservation might ramp up.
Okay, one more question. On page 1, the last statement on that page, and you talk about like population growth, is that for Honeybrook Township specifically that you're referencing, that you think that the township may grow like 2,300 people?
Yeah, so those are population projections through 2050 from Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. So that's the planning commission that oversees Chester County, Delaware County, basically all the counties surrounding Philadelphia, and they come out with population projections every 5 years, I think. So those are their population projections, but they are just projections, and that's based on past population growth and past trends. So
it doesn't take into consideration land preservation or which properties aren't going to be built on, or?
it does to some degree, but it also makes a lot of assumptions. So if additional lands are preserved, it doesn't factor in that. So this is just a projection based on past trends, but if you preserved all open land in the township between now and 2050, obviously that development has nowhere to go, so it's not likely, this is not likely to become true. So it is very crystal ball-y, but we do have to kind of try to factor that in some way. But it also can make a good case for preservation, because you can, as a community, help shape the way that your community is going to be in the next, 30 to 50 years by making decisions to preserve land as opposed to leave them for development. And then I know you go first. Okay.
Oh, okay. Regarding the charts and graphs, some of them only go up to 2022, some of them 2023. Will they all be 2024 numbers in the final draft and final plan?
So I'm hoping that. So the charts and graphs that go up to 2023, I know there's one which we can update now once we have the cumulative protected lands acres. We could update that once we have the final protected lands numbers through 2024. Some of the financial, like the open space expenditures and the leveraged funds, those three charts, we use county data for that. So their data, basically they have a whole chart that outlines every single property that's been preserved in each of the townships and the portion of funding, where that funding came from. So how much came from the county, how much came from the township, how much came from the state, and then other sources. Their data was only updated up through 2023, or 2020. Well, I think it was updated through 2023, but there was no parcel information in Honeybrook for 2022 and 2023. So we reached out to the county to see if they have updated numbers. They usually put them on their website. So I'm hoping that we'll have that information.
Because I don't think we had anything in 2023 or 2024, right?
Okay.
Lauren?
I believe you're correct.
Okay, so it might-
Updated with, yeah.
So if you didn't have any land protect, I can just make sure the chart goes up to 2024, even if it's not showing anything. I was just I only have the county data to go off of, but I'll circle around just to confirm.
Okay, and then my other question regarding the financial information on page 28. The account balance for 2024, I don't think that's accurate. I'm not sure where that number came from, but I'm looking at the account balance and it's closer to 7.2 million.
I think I got that from the treasurer, but I can check my email. I can double check.
Because that would change it's $3 million off.
Right.
Start.
I'll make a note to double check that, but I reached out a couple weeks ago, but maybe I misread the account balance.
And also, you should know that in 2025, there is a transfer going into our land preservation account for almost $900,000. That should probably be, it was money that land preservation had moved to the park and rec fund
Okay.
and is being transferred back, so that's pretty significant.
And that transfer will occur in 2025?
It
has?
occurred, yeah. So
Okay.
the fund balance is just a little bit over 6 million right
Okay.
Where are you? I'm looking at the treasurer's report, Warren.
now. Yes, we have 6 million in the EIT. Okay, so we have 6 million term, 1.7. So we have 3 separate accounts. Because
Okay.
we have some investments, so it looks like we're over 7.8 million.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was looking at one of the 2 funds. And I can send you the updated
Okay.
report. Or
Yeah.
I can show you how to,
Access it?
well, read it.
Okay,
I can show you where
awesome.
it's funded, so.
Perfect.
And that's
Thank
up
you.
to March 31st.
So just following up on what Erin's calling out in this draft report, is the text part correct? Because I noticed differences between the text and what the graphs were showing. So I was just thinking this was a draft and you were planning to, you still had numbers to update. So can you confirm if you thought the text was right and maybe the graphs and charts are just a little bit off?
I mean, it is just a first draft.
Yeah.
So we will go through and make sure once we have all of the numbers finalized, make sure that that's reflected both in the graphs and the text.
Okay. And what is your timeline? So this is the first draft that we're seeing, and then you mentioned another draft in August. Is there some target date that the plan needs to be approved?
I mean, when the committee feels that they're comfortable with it, we were hoping that by the August meeting, it would be in good enough shape that, you know, with some minor tweaks we could make and the board could then review it, but it's kind of subject to, well, that was assuming that we would have more representatives from the Land Preservation Committee for some input. So it depends on the input that I get between now and August.
Would it be possible for you to take the input that you're getting tonight, work on the draft, and then maybe a month in advance of the August meeting, get it to the committee so that you could make some other comments and updates before the draft you present at the August meeting?
Sure, yeah, if you can then send me any edits that you have between then and that draft, I can try to have the most up-to-date draft for you. But yes, I tried to shoot for a month, but I think it turned out to be like 3 weeks in advance, maybe 2 weeks for this draft. But yes, I'll shoot for a month, so that would be middle of July to send to the committee for review. And I'll send it out again with my list of questions this week to collect input as well.
I have a question for you about the financial table on page 28. You have the EIT revenue projection, and that stays static through 2029. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but my recollection was that the revenue that we're bringing in from the EIT is going up steadily over the years. Maybe that shouldn't be flat.
Yeah, I think we just assume that moving forward because we don't have, I mean, we could look to see what the rate of change is, but it is all subject to.
Sure, it's a guess, it's a variable.
Right,
But
right.
I don't think staying flat is a reasonable option either.
Okay, so we can look at, we can try to figure out a rate of increase.
And again, just put a note on there, this is assuming that, you know, we're presuming 2%, whatever it is.
Right.
The township has a 5-year budget projection.
Okay.
That we can send you.
I can just pull that.
Yeah, that has the accelerators in it,
Okay,
so we can do that.
yeah, that would be good because then I can make sure that it's consistent with township budget.
I'm not sure, is it possible to get a diff of the previous plan and this plan? Like, a diff of it, like you see what changed from the previous plan to this plan, or these weren't version controlled to be able to do that? Like, I understand the tables and stuff are probably hard to diff, but like the wording and stuff around some of the acquisition pieces that you put in there, like, see what's different there that changed in the plan.
Yeah, and most of the actual content hasn't changed other than the numbers being updated to make sure they're consistent. And maybe in the first part, just, Well, yeah, we haven't really updated much of the actual text.
It's mainly the projections and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you did add that acquisition piece in there, that wasn't in there
Yes.
previously, so that's something that's
Yes.
new.
That's new.
Okay.
So I can look to see if, I can compare this with, I have to remember how I did it, if I just copied the old plan and then updated from there, or if we started fresh, but I can see if we can get some versioning.
It's always something good to have, especially with a document like this.
Right.
And then the other thing I saw was that correctly, I saw it was only about 250 acres preserved since 2019 to 2025? Is that what the number was? I thought I saw.
I think it's 395, if I'm
395.
reading the right number.
So my question with that is, I mean, there's a problem there. So what I'm trying to understand is it the Conservancy's job or the board's job to do the outreach and the planning and to figure out what land is available for preservation? Like, if you go 5 years and you preserve only 350 acres, there is an execution problem here on the plan.
Yeah,
So-
and COVID.
So COVID really did, because a lot of the land preservation, especially in Honeybrook, that happens is talking directly, face to face. As John Goodall always says, around a kitchen table. So that really slowed down across the county land preservation, almost to a halt, at least for a year, if not two. The other thing that now, because the township has preserved so much land, a lot of the early land preservation adopters, the landowners that were, the opportunity arose, they took it immediately, those low-hanging fruit, a lot of that has been picked. So, as Susan mentioned, having a graph or a list of all the landowners that have been
Well,
approached.
and that's, yeah, she mentioned that, that's what made me think of it, was, a list of properties of parcels that are available for, but whose job is it to go do that speak? I mean, COVID's been 3 years since people are wearing masks, or if not longer. And is it the township or the conservancy to go out and hunt these people down, not hunt, but go down and talk to them and say, hey, would you like to do this? Like, and then at what point, do you normally in this process go back and say, okay, I'm gonna check this property off, we're gonna drop to the bottom. We're gonna say, pretty much we're not gonna preserve this land. You can kind of figure out, I mean, how many homeowners are there, or landowners are there that own all these parcels? That if you went to go out and talk to them, you could pretty run through this in a year and figure this out.
Well, I think we have some great opportunities with it. Seeing that we did have issues with COVID, we're past that now, you're absolutely correct. Now's the time to make the run for the goal.
Well,
there is quite a bit of funds in there.
I mean, a lot of funds.
There is.
And that kind of goes back to when we talk about the reduction of the funds. I think Ms. Lacy said about a referendum to reduce down to 0.25%. I personally think, we're almost double where in the plan it says you would reduce after $4 million. I can't imagine that we're gonna have a big intake, especially for the value of land to develop upon.
The 2019 program, that 4 million was adopted from that, like you said. And not to go back to the excuse of COVID, but for a couple of years, the 2019 plan got shot because of a worldwide epidemic.
Yeah.
So now we do have more funds than we expected to have because we were unable to preserve during the period that I wasn't here, but I'm the new guy. So
Right.
I think this is a great opportunity to, let's work into the new business of number 2, funding farms and preservation. Susan had around the list, we just make a list, we work with the conservancy because it's everyone's job here to do that. They have a lot of the technical expertise that we don't have.
Well,
And we look at them for guidance, but go ahead.
that's what I was trying to figure out. Who makes the contact?
It's a partnership.
All right.
So, John Goodall, who does probably the bulk of the face-to-face contact, works for the Conservancy. Obviously, the board members here They do go out and try to speak with farmers, so it's really a cooperation. But John Goodall said it a few meetings ago that he goes where there's interest. So he deals with how many counties, or is it predominantly Chester County? But
Mostly Chester.
most of Chester
But,
County. So if there's more interest in land preservation in the southern portion of the county and there's more receptive landowners, that's where he's going, because the conservancy, his job is just to preserve land throughout the county.
Just
So as there's interest in Honeybrook, obviously if we have an interested party, then we call if, in conjunction with the committee, and go out and speak with them. So it's a partnership. It's not just either the conservancy or the land preservation committee. It's a combination depending on that situation.
Two last quick comments. When we talk about the reduction of the fee, have you ever written into any plan that says, okay, we've hit $8 million, we cut it down to 0.25%, we go down to $2 million, we raise it back up? Like, or is it just always a vote? Like, I mean, because I can see where, like, okay, you go down a certain point, you want to start increasing your funds again, you go back up. But right now, we have a very open-ended tax right now that's just going to keep building and building and building that we're getting hit with. And if, you know, I would expect to see in any future meetings that our plan is that we have 200 parcels that are able to be preserved. We've contacted 10 homeowners, and we have 190 to go. Each meeting should be something like that, where you get a status and you give that out as part of land preservation. And you should be able to easily track that and say, okay, now we can cut back the fee, that we are kind of done with this tax. I'm honestly really sick of paying this tax, especially when nothing's getting preserved. So, that's
So you like to see it as like regular business?
I would like to
List of
see
stats on.
Yeah,
on
because
this that
you say John Goodall, I don't know him, but it sounds like a guy that goes to some of the farmers, talks to them. But what's he keeping as a ledger of this conversation, of this plan, of this execution, of talking to these people? I mean, you need measurable goals and statistics on how to go about this, because right now, nothing's happening. And granted COVID, but we are still many years past COVID and nothing has happened. And taxes are being collected every year. I just wrote my check today, and I'm not very happy about it. And I think we should have a way to get out from under this eventually. So, that's it. I'm done. Thank you.
I think Erin, you were already up for a while.
A couple questions. Can we back up to the township that bought some land that they decided they did not want to get developed? Is that what?
Is that West Bradford you were speaking about?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
The ones that bought it and then
Can I
sold
just-
it with easement on.
yeah, but
Okay.
just would like to, because I just want to hear from you. So they had land, and I guess developers wanted to come in, and the township decided, no, they don't want no more. So the township bought the land and put it under the easement. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so the property, and I don't remember how many acres it was, but using just round numbers, say there was a property of 100 acres, and a developer based on zoning could come in and put, 2 acres owning 50 houses on that property. The township would go in and, offer to buy that property instead of the developer. And then what West Bradford did was they still subdivided that into, smaller properties, but instead of 50 different parcels, maybe they divided it up into 10 acre parcels or 5, 20 acre parcels, and then preserved, put easements on those, and then sold those as those 20 acre parcels. So that then left, the only expenditure they had would have been the cost of the easement, because when you ease a property, that basically comes off the sale price or the potential sale price, but then they did resell those properties. They've done something similar in Westtown Township with Craybilly Farm, where there was a property with existing structures on it, so they divided up all the existing structures, eased them, and then sold them as, large
Like
properties of
single
homes.
family home,
Right.
like 10 acres or something.
Right.
Okay, so you also said that the community has a say, like, to let the members, I guess, the board of supervisors or the land preservation that, we don't want this land developed, but yet we're getting feedback from them saying, no, we got to develop this land. Because we're told that we have to develop this land because there's so much, we have to have so much buildings and housing and all that kind of stuff.
So is that going back to our conversation about the
Yes.
population projections?
No, that's going from how the township bought land and did what they did to preserve land.
I don't know that there was any conversations from the community. I think the community was supportive of less development in that circumstance. But they had passed an open space referendum as well, so they also had an open space program. And they did a land preservation plan where that was outlined. So through that public planning process, but I don't think the community was wanting more development in that case. They were excited for less.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's like a group of us that don't want this one specific area of land to be developed.
Okay.
Okay, because it's got wetlands and, all this other stuff, and this developer keeps coming in and changing his mind, he wants to do this, whatever. We want it kept open, let some integrity and show that we don't have to be building 224 houses or 165 mobile homes. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and unfortunately, most cases it is up to having a willing landowner who's willing to sell to the township versus sell to a developer. And there is a lot of negotiation that has to take place. So, if a landowner says, hey, I want this property developed, and you can by zoning, and they're not interested in preservation, and they want to get the most, money out of the deal. There are certain protections in place within the township ordinance to prevent at least sensitive natural areas from being developed. So you wouldn't be able to develop in a wetland. So if that property is developed, some of that would be preserved through the township ordinance, but unfortunately, it does take a willing landowner. They're one piece of the puzzle or one piece of the equation for ultimate land preservation.
Sally, you had your hand up, then I'll get to you.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment on the conversation that you're having is, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of times you get into a discussion like that, you got to keep in mind that the township, we can't go against a bidding war with the developer.
Right.
We can only pay what an appraisal is. So a lot of times the developer will come in and he'll bid $100,000 more, or $500,000 more, because he knows he can make that up in a sale. And unfortunately, at that point, the township's hands are tied because we can't pay more than an appraisal. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, thanks for that clarification. Which is
But,
why
but,
it takes
the-
a
but they
while.
have to go out and actually talk to the land person, correct? And say, this is what this is, you know what I mean? Give them a big outlook and not just say, we want your land because we don't want this, or, you're gonna, you can't, you're not gonna be able to build on this, this, and this because it's wetlands or bog, water, poor drainage, whatever. I've heard people on my social media complaining about Icedale, that live down on Icedale, complaining about the new trailer park going in and everything washing down the hills. down into their land because there's poor drainage, you know. I just want to make sure that that person, whether it be me, Joe Schmo, whoever, that has, say, 10 acres, and I want to sell it, I would like to be able to hear both sides of the story, not just one.
So be offered the opportunity to preserve as well as develop?
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I don't know if the township when a proposal comes, so typically when someone wants to sell their land to a developer comes in with a proposal for, they call it a sketch plan, with the proposed development, and you have to meet certain requirements within township code to be able to develop it a certain way. But there is an opportunity at that time for that conversation to happen. But again, you can't, a landowner, you know, would rather take more money that the developer is offering. There's only, the township has a cap for how much they can purchase a property.
Well, this land.
I think we're lucky too that there isn't much more zoned residential. So even if someone's going to sell something, they can't sell it for houses because it's not zoned that way. So a lot of things, the parcels that are going to go up, a lot of them are agriculture. So it isn't somewhere where someone's going to do that and have it each, one side or another, it's zoned agriculture, that's the way it's going to be. So until that, if ever changes.
Yeah, it was zoned agricultural, I believe, and then they switched it to multi-use, whatever. But,
Does it work proper?
yeah,
Okay, I know there's a whole lot, there's a whole story into that
yeah. Now, I've lived here 50.
it's something we can discuss later, I mean, if you want to.
I mean, I just want to say, I've lived here 56 years. That land has been up for sale 56 years, since I was a kid. And nobody's ever bought it because there's obviously a problem with the land. You know what I mean? Because developers have went in there and looked at it, seen it, and ran it. You know, but then you get shady people that come in, and, you know, they don't care because they're just gonna come in, destroy our environment, and the houses and everything else, and they're out of there. They don't have to deal with the repercussions as we do.
Well, that's something we're going to always add to the list, and if the owners wants to speak with us, more than glad to have a discussion, so that's great, thanks for that, Karen, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Uh,
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm
No,
sorry.
right back at you, great discussion. No. Erin, go ahead.
I just wanted to add a couple more things. Going back to that financial plan on page 28. Another thing to consider is the interest income. With that account generates, I know interest rates are going down, but like a couple $100,000 a year in interest. So that should be accounted for in the revenue projection. Also, is it true, Warren, that you need a referendum to reduce the tax? I thought it was only to increase it.
So
So you could eliminate it without a referendum, right?
So we checked with DCED and they have not gave us a very clear answer on about changing the amount, so that's a question mark.
But could it be eliminated?
So if it's enacted through that process, the only way to eliminate it is through the referendum as well. We don't have a clear defined path unless you know how to either change that rate up, or, I mean, we can't go up, but
Right.
to reduce it.
Yeah.
We looked at it at a high level last year, and we didn't get a clear answer on how that would occur. I would assume it would be via referendum, since that's how the tax was enacted initially.
Okay. And then the other thing to keep in mind is farms can be preserved without township funds. This program is great, but our neighboring township, West Hampton Township, has never had a tax, and they have a third of their township is preserved. So I think people well, don't let the program go away, which in my calculations, I've done a lot of number crunching. There's enough money to do what we need to do in the account right now. My goal will be to eliminate it. Also, the last farm that was preserved in Honeybrook Township only used state funds. Is there a reason that a farmer would choose to go that route? I mean, this is prime farmland. So why would they just only, like, not choose to use township? I guess that's my question. Did that not come to you guys?
So the application process, is through the county, so no farmer applies for land preservation directly through the township. They apply through the Chester County program. And Chester County develops that list. And when it comes back to the Land Preservation Committee, the ask is, are we willing to participate or not? So we don't have any,
I don't think that one ever even came back to us, though.
I'm not aware of when that occurred, so without more
It was the
specifics.
most recent one, it was a neighbor of ours, and I'm just curious, so in that circumstance, there was no township funds, but I just didn't know why.
I mean, that question would probably be, if you are friendly with your neighbor, that would be a great question to ask why they went that route. And not
Yeah, it was a
the-
55-acre parcel in 2022.
Yeah.
It's the last one I know of. And they still got the going rate, but all the funds came from the state. No county, no federal, no
I mean,
town.
if you would invite them to the next meeting?
No,
and
they already
explain
preserved
it.
their farm, I don't know. I'm just
Do you know
curious.
why any-
I'm not familiar with that particular, that just came up when I pulled the county funds. I don't know if the conservancy was involved. So, full disclosure, I work on the municipal assistant side of things, so mostly with municipalities, and am not as integrated in the land conservation side. So I can find out if that was a easement that was facilitated by the conservancy, but it could have also been through another organization, and they would have likely had to apply for grant funding through the state to preserve that. So, yeah, I don't know anything specific on that, and if it was another, preservation partner who works in this area.
Yeah, do you have their parcel number?
Yeah, it's on,
Was it a farm or was it like, would a lot or something else?
no, it's farmland.
It's a farmland.
Yeah, it's 22-4-61.1.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
it could have been,
No, it's corn and, it's a nice farm. So it's like-
Erin, it could have been the location or features of the property. I mean, there's a number of funding sources that work on land preservation. Some only for agricultural land, some for ag and forest land. And that's largely what Jeff Shelton does. He sees these incoming interested properties, and then he matches that up with the funding that's available. Because there's also been funding that's come through, like the city of Wilmington, from a few charitable foundations. When we started this program, we were paying 100% of the easement costs. We now have that down to, like 22.5%. So we've leveraged a lot of money in this program from the various partners. But not every property fits every funding source's criteria. So I don't know, I'm not familiar with the property you're talking about, so I don't know exactly why that was funded with state funds, but ordinarily we would say, yay, that leaves more Honeybrook Township funds.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it state game land? Is it next to state game land?
No, it's farmland.
No, huh? No.
I was curious to know why they, I would think they would, if there was township funds available, they would have tried to get some of those.
Yes,
Just a quick comment to John, great points that you had. The only thing that I've heard of someone in the past, and I wasn't involved, so I don't know, but just because a farmer may say no today, I know, like, talking to John Goodall, some of his experiences, doesn't mean 5 years from now that they really need money, and you hit them up again, that they change their mind. So it's just.
No, I get that, I get that, but say you went through this list, 5 years down the road, we're gonna have $15 million in the bank, no farms preserved, and we have, you know, the account balance on the interest is just, keeps going up. I mean, we have to plan to get to the tax to stop, like, it just has to end. Like,
No, I don't disagree, I was just making a comment that.
yeah, I don't agree, but, and I don't disagree, I'm just saying,
Interest to continue,
Like-
like, that's always historical, so, but I think we need a plan at some point to say, is it 5 million, is it 10 million, is it 20 million?
well, and I think that's where you are with, you know, okay, these are how many parcels we have, these are the people we've contacted, these people have said no, these people have said yes. We could easily put together and say, okay, a projection of this is the budget that we would need, you'd be able to see if the 7 million is sufficient, and then you could either reduce or get rid of the taxes.
Well, and then I think if you take them numbers, like you're saying, you present them to the people, and then you have that referendum, then you let the people choose that, hey, we got 10 million, we got 10 million. If
Well,
it happens in the next 20 years that we could have preserved more, we ain't got the money, oh, well, the voters voted, or vice versa, that everybody votes and makes the decision.
I would almost bet 50% of the people in the township don't even know they pay 5% of land preservation. I would almost bet it, it's become such a just ingrained.
Right.
And real quick too, the 2019 land preservation is on the website. So if you go on the township website, just Google like 2019 or land pres, it'll be one of the forms you show up. Okay, so we were on chapter 3 questions. Anyone else have anything to offer?
I just have one
And when
more.
everybody offered was great.
I just have one more question. Easement, the easement payments, is that like an ongoing cost to land preservation? Is that what that is? Or is that just payments to put the easement in? Like, is there a cost associated that every year, if you were to stop the tax today, is there a cost to the preserved land at that point going forward? Like you said, somebody comes
So
out.
once the payments are fulfilled, from the township's point of view, the easement is being held. So if a landowner eased his property 5 years ago and that was the last payment, this program doesn't fund it anymore. He had received his compensation for.
All right, I wasn't sure, because you said somebody comes out to the property, checks it on an annual basis. That doesn't cost us any money going forward.
Those are strictly for conservation easements, and typically there's an endowment that's set up, but that's still, it's not an ongoing cost.
Okay.
So, it's just money set aside at the point of that transaction being finalized, that then, we have then an endowment for that.
All right, thank you.
But the agricultural easements don't, that doesn't apply to the agricultural easements.
Did you have anything, Erin? I thought you were, okay. All right. So we did farming, farms preservation, number 2 under new business. I think we had a very healthy discussion about that. We're gonna work our way into it. The Given Road property preservation. Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Real quickly, I have a bunch of other things, but we're running out of time. Can I just send you an email on some additional questions and comments?
Yes. I welcome any additional comments via email.
There's some weird numbers in how to community services.
Yeah.
I go over with it.
Sure. Yes, thank you.
All right. And for number 3 under new business, the Given Road property preservation. Because we're all not here, I would suggest that we table that until the next meeting.
Quick question for Warren. This letter to you from the conservancy is dated October 29.
Where are we at?
It's the proposal on the.
Oh, the Givens?
Yeah.
Yep. Sure.
It's 6 months later. What has happened on this in the interim? Did you actually receive this on October 29th?
So we closed on the property in March.
Okay.
So the township has taken ownership of that. We just submitted our tax exemption for property tax through the county. So the first step was just getting it into the hands of the township, getting it donated.
Okay.
And that was the landowner's ask and the concern of the conservancy of word got out that this property was becoming available, that there would be pressure to sell it. So the intent was just to purchase it. We have it held now. It's our township-owned property. So the next steps
Is to do the
is to fulfill the wishes of the donor. And that's going to be potentially putting the easement on and then having a discussion with Rec and Park to see if we could do like a limited nature trail, maybe put a few unimproved parking spots on it. So, yeah, so the first step was just to receive ownership of the parcel, which we have completed.
Okay, so the next steps would be for this committee to discuss the easement and make a recommendation,
Yes, ma'am.
and then Parks and Rec to make a recommendation.
I think the first step is to place the easement on it. And then get community input or Park and Rec input, understanding that coming to land preservation first, if the easement is set in place, then Park and Rec is limited to what type of disturbances we can do. As part of the easement program, if we want to cut out parking spots or something like that, that's going to be something that we need to decide. The property is slightly wet in front on the road facing side and drier in the back. So obviously, when we make that easement, we want to make sure that we carve out any spots that we might want to do some potential development. Again, you know, a few parking spots or something like that, a trail system.
Is Parks and Rec giving this any thought or discussion at this point?
It has not gone to them because we need to decide. Well, ultimately, the wish of the landowner is to not make it a township park, clear cut the woodlands. His goal was when he purchased it many years ago to have a place to go hunting or set up a little campsite, and he wishes to have that enjoyment passed on to others. This came about because it was offered to the conservancy. The parcel was too small for them to keep it on their rolls, so they wanted to find a willing partner that would do good with the parcel and agree with the vision of the landowner, which again is preservation. So it should come to land preservation first. Again, this is not something the township had even thought about developing because up until October, it wasn't even on our radar. So again, the initial priority was purchase it. Second priority will be do the preservation portion of it. And then the final portion would be what to do with that. And that might be a multiple year process since it wasn't on property owned by the township until March. We don't really have any plans to do anything except remove it from development.
Lauren, I have a question. Since the township owns it and you preserve it, can you get funds from any of these outside conservations or anything to preserve it?
Potentially natural lands, if we wanted to put an easement, but I don't know what size lots they were, or what kind of acreage they require. You know, the township does require 10 acres to even be considered.
What is it, 10?
It's 10 acres
Yeah.
to be considered into the land preservation program. Again, the property was donated to us, so I would probably be apprehensive of taking state funds or taxpayer funds for something that, you know, cost us just the cost of processing the
Yeah, I just thought
receivership.
it wouldn't hurt to ask and we could use that money for the, whatever you want to put.
So-
improvements, walking trails, parking. whatever.
So to answer your question, so with DCNR grants and the county park and rec grants, they typically give you about $250,000 per individual parcel or park to utilize. So we would have the capability to seek state and county funds for those improvements. So we're not there yet. I think the goal was just to get it in the state we have it now. and again, I'm with the James Humboldt Park plan being in progress. Now, whatever could occur here would not relieve any of the pressure for the facilities there. So I think the priority right now is to have Park and Rec focus on doing the most important project, and when time allows, then we can start getting their input, and then based upon the input we hear from them, then we can seek those funding sources. But there is definitely funding available to do some improvements.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure how it worked when the township is railroad property.
So typically, I think as Sarah said, and that was part of the acquisition process, you can purchase the land outright from the landowner, preserve it, we typically don't pay our share.
Right.
So we wouldn't have to pay back the township for the preservation, so it would be, if it was a farm, the county and the conservancy making up the preservation costs, we would just not have to put in our 20-some%. And as Sarah said, when you sell it, because of the easement on it, it's a little bit less, but since we didn't really pay much, except for closing costs, we would seek the DCNR funding. DCNR is a little bit weird, can't pay for parking lots for improvements. I'm not sure if that's different with County Park and Rec. I know they did help us purchase Humboldt Park, both DCNR and the County Park and Rec program. When we purchased it, we did receive grants from them for the purchase and improvements of them over time. So I don't have enough information, I haven't looked that deep.
But the cost of the easement, preparation, and endowment, that will be covered on the land preservation?
Under land preservation funds, yeah, and we're still, we haven't gotten to the endowment portion yet with the conservancy. That's upcoming to decide what that would be, and what that would look like.
So the amount here is flexible?
So we've already paid the closing costs. So the endowment cost, I'm sure I'm a negotiator. I've already told John it all, because since we're a municipality, it's not like probably a typical easement where it's a landowner, but it's a municipality. So I think maybe the oversight that is needed to monitor this might be less than a typical private landowner.
Okay, so you said you paid the closing costs. There's an estimated staff time and expenses for the,
And we paid the conservancy that as well. That was rolled into the
so
closing.
all of that has already been.
Correct. The only thing is the endowment that we have not done yet. So yes, so at the closing, we paid the conservancy and the title company for the closing costs.
I didn't know if that were.
And the associated work.
If that cost that you had already paid was for getting the property.
Everything but the, oversight, the endowment. So everything but the endowment has been taken care of.
So can I ask how much money we're paying for donating money, for donating ground here? I'm just curious.
I'm sorry, what was it?
So we've got donated ground.
Are
and
you
we're
talking
paying
about
how
the
much
given through property or just in general, like easement
Yeah, so
property?
this property owner donated the ground,
Yes.
and we're paying how much?
We paid do you have the numbers of the closing? I don't have that.
It was $89.33 for all the prep work.
8,933, yeah. I think we wrote a check. I'm not sure what we paid the conservancy.
This was an estimated amount.
Yeah, I would have to get those numbers.
Yeah, so we paid what, maybe $10,000?
I can't give you the answer without looking back at the.
Well, I think that's
But
pretty
it
generous
was,
of them.
yeah.
Okay, I think that was pretty generous of
Yeah,
them.
for 10 acres, yeah.
Perfect.
I don't have the number, but it wasn't.
Okay, I just think that was pretty
Mhm.
generous that we got it for $10,000.
It was very generous, yes.
This ground.
I don't step on toes.
No, I was just looking to see where you were on that.
Well, we're old business now, so review of land preservation committee duties, chapter 1, part 3D, page 115 through 117. So I believe that is just the ordinance that governs land preservation?
Yeah, the township put that in because Steve is a new member, and we wanted to give Steve and the board just a review of what the ordinance establishing the committee was and the responsibilities of the land preservation committee. So it's just a document for you to review.
And under business number 2 is the annual report for 2024. It seems to be our non-compliance with the ordinance as far as needing a report for last year's preservation activities. So that's something, because I can work with Shane, we can work you to get up to speed with that.
Shane pretty much did it last year. We're going to put on the rest of this.
So we can get on that and have that done for the next meeting, so. Upcoming meetings, will be August 19th, 2025, October 21st, 2025, and January 20th, 2026, which should probably be the morning meeting with the farmers records station.
That would be the January meeting, yes, the reorg.
All right, so if there is no other business, make a motion to adjourn the meeting.